So we've got a little bit of an unplanned sequel video here, as I didn't actually know about this game's existence until its dev commented on one of the videos I make about it. So for the second major game from RPG Maker With I'm going to be covering in this series, despite this being a completely impromptu episode, the Portland River Killer. Now, before I start this review, I need to give something of a warning here with this video. This episode of the RPG Maker Reviews covers some heavy discussions about mental disorders and the consequences of them. The stereotypes about how some of them have been used in the media, television, video games and the like, and the misconceptions people have as a result of it. Most, if not all, of this discussion is from my research into these disorders, which I am limited by my lack of access to psychology books, papers and the like. Which means not everything I say about these disorders will be 100% correct, accurate, and up to date with the modern data collected about these disorders. So, if I say anything wrong about these disorders in this video, I apologize in advance, and would be happy to be corrected about this information in the comment section below. With all of that out of the way, let's discuss the damn game. The Portland River Killer is a direct sequel to A Murder in Buckfield, which remains one of my favourite games I have covered thus far in the series. But instead of playing as the detective trying to solve the murder, who, as a reminder for the sake of the game, I named John Wilkes-Barre, this time you play as an author/investigative journalist who covered the events of A Murder in Buckfield, who I named William Scott. William is an incredibly layered character, who's incredibly well written from what I have seen of him, and introductory sections that you see here introduces several new mechanics to the series, but the most important one I will talk about is the stat system. William has 3 major stats that you can raise through conversations and interactions around the world. These strength, intelligence, and intuition checks, as you raise the stats, will perform more information about the world around you. Like, for example, if you have a high enough strength check, you can break a lock on a lighthouse and get in there. But if you don't, you can't, and you miss out on everything in there. And while its predecessor was solely an exploration and logic game of trying to investigate and solve a murder in small-town USA, this time you actually have combat in an RPG Maker experience. But this time, it's still a logic and exploration game, and the logic side of it still carries into the combat, and it makes for an incredibly unique combat system. This game's combat relies on utilizing limited uses of speech phrases in order to best your enemies, your inner demons. Whether it be by debuffing them, buffing yourself, doing heavy damage, or whatever, it is incredibly important that you know how to use these turns of speech in order to turn combat in your favor. And I think now is as good a time as any is to talk about this game and its connection to mental health struggles. Just get the heavier stuff out the way early. William is a deeply broken individual. From what limited moments you have of him in the introductory section, you learn that he skips therapy sessions regularly and drops his medication due to how it makes him feel, and his own words indicate he's a lot worse off than he thinks. And as a struggling author, his instability mentally affects his writing and work, giving him huge chunks of writer's block that he finds incredibly hard to break through without stopping and going outside, which while normally is a great help to deal with blocks like this, seems to weigh him down more than anything else, as it's denying him from making his next big break. While his therapy is for something else entirely, however, William seems to me like he's suffering from depression stemming from the death of his wife. You can see this in nightmare sequences that he still misses her and that he, to an extent, blames himself for the death of his wife. And his depression extends into his life as a roadblock to achieve his goals. Now, the other thing William suffers from is where my armchair psychologist studies get into the realm of conceptually. And I reiterate, I am not a psychologist, I have done no form of higher education in psychology, and everything I'm about to say is solely from what I have researched and learned for the sake of this video. William suffers from dissociative identity disorder. Or at least, he mentions the disorder in an optional monologue. Dissociative identity disorder, or DID for short, is a mental disorder where a young brain has gone through so much trauma, whether that be physical, mental, or sexual, that they physically can't handle it. The brain can't take it, and it needs a sort of escape option. And the way for the brain to do that is to fragment the mind into several different personality states, so that the brain doesn't have to handle all of that trauma alone. It's a horrible disorder that people suffer with their whole lives, and while some people are able to make somewhat of a recovery after years of therapy and exposure to help with everything that's been going, most don't. And it brings forth one of the worst stereotypes I see in media: the evil personality. There's an old trope in TV and video games where characters have an evil personality that lie dormant, ranging from TV shows such as Total Drama to video games such as Danganronpa. And it appears this trope continues here. I say continues because I don't actually fully have a clear picture of what's happening, so in time that'll make more sense. However, it is very nice to see more of the ugly sides of depression and mental disorders of the like. There's a huge segment in the tail end of what I had played where William locks himself into his room and works tirelessly on end, neglecting the cat he adopted and completely disassembling his room down to the bare essentials. It's an ugly and raw side of mental disorders that you don't normally get to see because of how glamorized mental illness has become in recent years. But moving on to the other game mechanics, because there are still more to cover here. While last time covering Buckfield, I had to shake up the ranking systems because there was no combat and there were very few characters, I can actually rank it normally, as there's RPG combat in an RPG Maker game. Absolutely delightful. And, more importantly, the ensemble cast. With many returning faces from the first game put in completely new lights due to the change of protagonist, you actually have some sort of stake in the police force when the game starts. You have a moderate degree of knowledge on them, but this time they're playing a completely different role than last time. And the characters you played as and theorized with now suspect your character for murder. It's such a unique spin on the character dynamic that you don't normally get to see in games, and I love to see more aspects of characters in sequel games. But the most important part of this game that took me off guard is you're not actually able to see everything at once. You get given options of where to go and what to do with your time in the day, whether that range from going to a coffee shop or actually going to work, or whether it's hiking a mountain or going to a beach or choosing what park to go to. You have so many options that you can interact with. Like on my game, I didn't go to work and I went to the coffee shop and I read. I read a book that I took from my home, which allowed me to raise my stats to a slight bit. I then went up a hill, had an interaction with a fox, and boosted my stats more there. Then the following day, I went to the park. Well, more specifically, I went to the park where I could race a young girl and do a crossword with a young boy, specifically a Japanese crossword, and I won't be ashamed to admit that I did have to Google Translate it, because I am exceptionally white, and I struggled with anything outside of the 3 years of German that I had to take in high school when it comes to languages and the barriers they pose. What I'm trying to say is that this game has one of the most exclusively branching storylines, with entire aspects of the game being completely cut off to you if you don't do it then and now. Hell, the therapy session that I attended that gave me the bulk of the RPG combat that I experienced was entirely optional and completely missable if I chose to go to work instead of therapy. This is such a genius thing for a game to do, forcing you to make choices and preventing you from being able to do everything, especially in a mystery game such as this. It's such a good spin. And when the murders do start popping up, you're not actually given the full reign to investigate. Because why would you? You're an investigative journalist and not a cop. Hell, the only reason you're allowed on the crime scenes in the first place is sheer curiosity turning to suspicion later down the track. You're only allowed there because they want to keep an eye on you. It's just such an interesting game, and I am incredibly eager to play more of it later down the line, which is why I made the impromptu decision of reviewing this instead of covering it along with a bunch of other games. Well, that, and I'm running out of actual space for games to look at, and I don't want to make a whole new PlayStation account. The point stands. I made a good choice in reviewing this off-rip. This game's story is a very interesting one for me to rank this time, as your choices actually influence the way the story plays out to an extent. So I will be exclusively ranking the story that I got, and from what I got, I can rank this a solid 4 out of 5. Slowly watching a man lose his sanity from the monotony of his life is incredibly relatable, and the tortured artist archetype for the protagonist definitely helps be painted by the scene in the therapist chair, along with the nightmare sequences and the hypnotist state. While watching the slow decline of him throughout the time I played is both heartbreaking and intriguing to watch, some of the story beats and dialogue may get a little emotionally heavy for those that aren't prepped for it. But I believe the story can expand beyond its contemporaries and become something even better than the others, especially due to the warning at the start of the game warning you that the stuff could get heavy. The characters, and I'll be lumping the ensemble cast in for this one, are a ball of interesting bits and pieces. William, our protagonist, is so fascinating to pick apart and look through the layers of his character, and the ensemble cast from the previous game help bolster the score as well. I'm gonna give character a 4 out of 5. With the ensemble cast to support him, William feels like even more of an oddity of a character, in a good way. With returning characters from A Murder in Buckfield to help support as well, you get to see some amazing faces that you didn't really expect to see again in a whole new scene and a whole new place, studying with a whole new different angle of them. Like I said earlier, you're the suspect, you're not the detective. So they're going to be treating you way differently than you would be if you were a detective helping on the crime. And it definitely helps bolster it out and make it feel much more alive with these characters having multifaceted parts of them. Now, combat I will be giving a 3 out of 5. I love the combat system and it is super ingenious, but there are a few flaws that hold it back for me. Starting with the net positives, this is, as I said, this is such a unique combat system, utilizing rhetoric and communication to reason out your battle more than anything else that I've seen in contemporarily. When fighting in the hypno state, however, you are only limited to using these rhetorics, which is a bit of a faux pas. Taking away aspects of combat for an extended period of time doesn't feel good, and being able to use fists and other weapons and devices in an earlier fight definitely doesn't help the matter, but I understand to an extent why you have to speak your way through the fights in the hypno state. The other things that I find really enjoyable, however, is how most rhetoric has additional effects on top of doing damage. It helps make everything feel much more unique. I just wish they would refresh after battles so that you'd be able to utilize them, or have certain types that take more damage from certain rhetorics than others, which I think is there. I don't actually know, however. Most of it just seem to be doing the same amount of damage consistently. So as I said, for all those reasons, I'm only going to be giving combat a 3 out of 5, but that's still an incredible position for it to be standing on. Now, exploration. Exploring Portfield, or this fictional version of Portfield, is great. Or Portland, sorry. Is amazing. And you feel like you're exploring a huge city. Exploring through the parks, and exploring into the bars, and the barista's office, and the therapy. It's all incredibly ingenious that you have full reign to fully explore Portland, but you can't do it all at once. You need to wait for certain keys to do it. My personal favorite thing to explore so far has been the park that I explored, namely because being able to try and beat a little girl in a dead race, or beating her time back, was really fun, and it really made me think about how to go about the map. I just really think that location design is this developer's strong suit. They do an amazing job designing futuristic or modern buildings that actually feel like you do it modern. But it's just really good. And so for that, I'm going to give Exploration a 4 out of 5. But as for enjoyability, it's where things get interesting. This game is an incredibly slow pace. It takes its sweet time to get going, and I don't even think I am fully at its getting going yet. However, this doesn't mean it's not an enjoyable experience. I have had a blast just exploring Portland, leveling up William's stats, dealing with his mental problems and attending therapy sessions and the like. And I just really like the small details, like the cat you can adopt, where if you have the cat and when you enter the mental state where you just completely lock yourself away and don't do anything, the cat gets annoyed with you because you haven't been properly looking after yourself or the cat. It's just very cool to see how everything builds itself. Portland, as it stands, is an incredibly fun place, and for basically a very tiny map at the moment, it is amazing how much you've packed in here. So, for enjoyability, I'm going to be giving this a 4 out of 5. It is an amazing game with so much to poke around and explore, and everything I do doesn't feel like it's a waste. Every movement feels like something's happening. So yeah, I just really enjoyed this experience, and I hope that it continues to be as good as it is now. And that's it for another video. Sorry this one took so long and was not a planned review video. I just really wanted to cover this game once I saw it had been released, because I really enjoyed A Murder in Buckfield, and this, as its contemporary, was kind of a nice change of pace. There will be another video in the works very soon. I'm just capturing the footage for it now-ish, but hopefully I'll try and speed up the video process, but don't have faith. Things are slowing down for me, I'm afraid. But as per usual, it was a lovely game to look at, and I would recommend people give it a try if they can stomach installing the with player. It's so different from any other game that I've played made in RPG Maker that it feels a delight to actually stop and play the game. But, you know, I can't make you play it. Play it if you liked the look of it, but I'd recommend it highly. With that said, have a good rest of your day, night, whatever it is for you, and take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next video.